I say good morning to each of you, and I am so delighted and honored to be here with my dear friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Linda Smith, who is known to many of you, and I am presenting her to others of you. And we're here today just to respond and be friends in conversation around the scripture that was read in your hearing today, where Jesus is offering a lesson on humility. So I'm hoping that we can just be good girlfriends over a pot of virtual tea or coffee, talking about fixing the world in 15 minutes. How about that? and thinking about humility, the subject of humility. So welcome, Dr. Linda.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So it strikes me after several years of being together that you are one of the most humble folks I know. And that's why I invited you to this particular conversation. And also, you're one of the wisest. I've figured after many times of you driving me around when we were in seminary and you praying up parking spaces. That you have a direct link uh, to God. And so, what do you think about the subject humility?
Well, first, I'm honored to always sit alongside you, Dr. Brown. You're a friend, a colleague, and many other things to me. Well, I love the subject of humility and I love this text because I think we live in a world where we've lost humility, the power of humility. And I know we'll engage in that a little bit further, but oftentimes we do things to say, look at me, look at what I've done. And humility is far from that. And so I think that in order for us to really live out the mandate of being humble and ensuring justice take place, that we do need to have hearts of humility.
Absolutely. I so love this scripture because I think if you read it, well, I won't say right or wrong, but if you read it with the voice of perhaps our grandmothers, Jesus is telling this story sort of like the corrective stories we got growing up, right? Because Jesus watched these folks come into the banquet hall and plop down in the places of honor. And, you know, somehow Jesus is welcoming us to remember that in great humility, you don't want to assume that you were an honored guest, right?
Right.
But somehow I think that's the way we raise our kids. That's becomes normative in terms of how we treat each other. We go to restaurants and folks treat the folks who are serving us like they're servants that we own rather than humans who are just trying to make a living like us. And so, what do you think it's going to take for us to infuse a sort of kindness and compassion and respect with one another and recover humility?
Wow. I think we have to start to see people as others. And so if we think about this text, Jesus was initially engaged with the Pharisees, and Jesus was not in opposition to having a feast. But what Jesus really was calling us to do is there are more people besides you that needs to be at this table. So I think as a community, as a world, we need to start to see each other as equal human beings, and that are deserving of the gift of life, deserving to sit at the table to the best feast, deserving of, and I can start to go on and on when we start to name social issues
Come
like
on now.
like housing and food and all those things. So I think as we start to see people as others, that another person, that other people, regardless of their economic status or social status, that they are just as equal and just as good and just as deserving as I am.
Absolutely. You said something so powerful. I think one of the things that we lose in terms of being people of faith, and particularly Christians, is that we're always supposed to be checking to see who's at the table
Uh,
and making space for the people who are not at the table, right? So later in the scripture, Jesus says, hey, you invite the people who can't pay you back, right? Because sometimes you invite people to the table that you think, will I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine later. But Jesus said, no, that's not what you do. You invite the people who perhaps can't pay you back. So what are the ways that we can invite Haiti to the table, right? How can we invite Afghanistan to the table? Those who are experiencing poverty and living in uninhabitable spaces all over our city and county and nation. How do we make sure that we're making space for them at the table?
wow, wow. That's really powerful. I think first of all is to, as you say, is to look around and see who's not there. Um, and I know you specifically mentioned Afghanistan and Haiti, but let me step back a little bit to COVID. And as our doors closed on our church buildings, closed in our office environment, then we were called to serve those who normally had been hidden in society, those who were food insecure, our homeless population, people who were experiencing homelessness. And so now suddenly these people are invited to the table. They're invited to the table of having adequate housing. They're invited to the table as we distribute food to, thousands, literally thousands of people. When in essence, before they had not been invited to the table, they were still experiencing homelessness. They were still experiencing
Come on.
food insecurity. They were still experiencing mental health issues and things like that. But our eyes were closed to those because we're so focused on, I like to call it the in crowd, those that we are most comfortable with, those who fit into our socials, social settings.
Right.
And so that's who we normally invite, the people that we're most familiar with. And I think this text, Jesus is really saying, you got to go out in the streets. And literally, I think the text says that go out in the streets and help those in Haiti, help those in Afghanistan, make room for them. There's a space for them here.
Yeah.
Send food to Haiti, send water to Haiti. I mean,
Right.
Haiti is still suffering from a past catastrophe that we've sort of like, initially we responded and then suddenly, we went back to our old ways.
That's
So,
right. You forget real quick.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't mean to go on, but it's just, thank you. It just touches my heart. This is a great conversation.
No, no, no. That's exactly why I invited you. Listen, you're a preacher extraordinaire, so you be yourself. But where you're going is right. And you said something that just blesses my heart because really we haven't acknowledged how COVID has leveled the playing field, right? Because for
Right.
the first time, some of us who are privileged, some of us who have benefited from supremacist culture, some of us who have benefited in a variety of ways, find ourselves in the same lines with folks who have been in lines all along, right?
Right.
Looking for food. They find themselves in the same lines, perhaps being threatened with housing insecurity and food insecurity. And in many regards, you're exactly right. There's something that happened during this time of pandemic where there's been such a leveling, not totally, because there's been some folks that, haven't suffered a moment, but for
Yeah.
others of us, folks have found out for the first time what it's like to be worried. What happens when there's no more security of the moratorium on rent, right? Or what's going to happen for those who are owners as well as renters when we're out of this pandemic and now you owe 18 months. Somehow of rent, somehow the field has been leveled. And so folks are having to be in solidarity with others they may not ever have been. Because as some great person said, I can't think now, where Americans are embarrassed folks on the way to be a millionaire, right? We're embarrassed that we're not millionaires rather than honoring where we are. And, we're always seeking this, higher status. So somebody will correct that because I truly messed up the quote. But in the moment, I'm just saying that you've raised something so important that I think we're able to see more clearly and be in solidarity with folks who are hurting because of what we've gone through in this pandemic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, thank you for articulating that. It's opening our eyes to like I say, the other. Um, we are so, as you say, based on white supremacists,
Mhm.
racism, and all of those things have separated people into categories. And because people are in different categories, they're sort of outcast.
Mhm.
And I think what COVID has done, like you say, is open our eyes to see just how so many people are impoverished, how so many people are really struggling just to make ends meet.
Mhm.
I ran into so many people, just taking food to elders and families, and it's like I've never had this much food. And so, it's like out of
Wow.
our struggles, we are really like lifting, like what Jesus said, bring them to the table, let them enjoy. Uh, and so I think in a way, which I'm really grateful for, is that people who have been suffering, who've been just trying to make ends meet, are
Mhm.
now having access to more food and you know having a place to sleep at night.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's beautiful.